All right, so you should be able to see my PowerPoint now. So this is going to be just to provide like a quick overview of kind of some of the comments and questions we see some that come up for transfer students, and for all new students, to be honest, during their first year, during their first semester. But we also, like I said, everyone is unique. So everyone's challenges, everyone's questions are unique, and we're mindful of that. But here's we want to provide some resources for you as you kind of get to know Rutgers. So, okay. So it's about a week into the semester. You're at a new school, so you're starting at Rutgers-Camden for the first time. We're also doing virtual learning, and so some of you may have had more experience with this than others, but no matter what, it's new for Rutgers-Camden, right? So you were never, when you thought about coming to Rutgers-Camden, however, whenever you planned this out, you probably weren't thinking that all my classes are going to be online or my entire experience are going to be online, right? So no matter what your experiences is, it does create a different expectation. And so the first week is a lot of stress. And so we can imagine that you're, in addition to everything else that might be going on in your life, I know some students, like I know Mrs. Waters has children that had just started online learning. So she's also managing that, as well as managing her own learning and her own job. And so I'm sure there's many of you that also have that task as well. So it's not just you that you're worrying about or your balance, it's also other people in your life. So we want to talk about some common questions that are probably coming up for you as you move through your first week, or even before the first week started. So when you got accepted into the university, when you first started getting the emails from people, some of the things that might have popped in your mind as you started this transition. So we kind of broke it down into three main areas that tend to come up. So the first one is financial, right? That's always one of the biggest things on students' minds because of the money. And so what's the deal with refunds? So as we move through this week, you may start seeing things appear on your term bill. So you all got an award letter. It tells you what you are kind of eligible for based on what you reported on your FAFSA, so based on the income in your household. And now that's being converted to actual disbursement. So you're going to start seeing over the next week or so any aid that you were going to get. So if you were going to get the tuition aid grant or the federal Pell Grant or things like that, they're going to start appearing and dispersing on your term bill. With that, if you're entitled to a refund, you're going to get that refund once that aid disperses. You can tell if you're going to get a refund by your term bill. So on your term bill, it's broken down by your charges and then by your payments. So, here's all your tuition, your online fees, whatever's on there, right? And then on the right side is your grants, your loans you may have taken out, maybe you got a scholarship. And then at the bottom, it either says balance or credit. So it'll say CR next to, if it's a credit, it'll say CR next to the number. If it's a credit, then that's the amount you're going to get back for like your refund. Now, there isn't separate book vouchers and refunds. So there is, if you do have money, it is able to apply to, I think it's, and Ms. Waters can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it's like $500 or so. If you have $500 of credit coming back, then you can use it as like almost like a book refund. And it can be used at like the Barnes and Nobles or like other sources where you can buy books. Otherwise, if maybe you're only getting like a couple $100 back, it's going to come back as an actual refund. So that either comes in like through your bank. If you set up to get like direct deposit, it would come almost like direct deposit. It would be deposited into your bank account. If you don't have that set up, then they're going to send you a check. And that's going to be, at this point, I think they're sending a check because there were times in the past where you're able to pick it up, but because we're now virtual, I believe they're going to send it home. Not everyone gets a refund. It really honestly depends on your situation. For people who are living on campus, typically we don't really see them get a refund because most of the aid that you're getting or the loans you're taking out are covering all those extra costs associated with housing, including like a meal plan, and then just the extra like $3,000 to $5,000 that housing costs. So typically people who are living on campus don't get the refund. But if you're commuting, you're living at home, a lot of times students do get refunds on some level depending on how much aid they're getting. So everyone's situation is different. And I really want to emphasize that because I was just talking about the Rutgers app, and I see people on the app saying like, some people are getting refunds and I'm not. Everyone's situation is different. Everyone's financial aid is different. Everyone's package is different. What I encourage you to do is if you have questions about your particular package or aid, that you talk to financial aid, and we're going to provide some resources for you in a little bit, like who you can talk to. Speaking of which, how can I see a financial aid counselor is a big one. Actually, everyone has an assigned financial aid counselor. It's by their last name. It's been a bit difficult and challenging this year because we're virtual, right? So you can't just waltz into the financial aid office and talk to anyone. It's all processed pretty much through email. If you're an EOF student, you can certainly ask your counselor who your financial aid counselor is. But you can also, if you're not an EOF student and you're joining us today, you can also just email me and I can share that information with you. I highly encourage you to, when you have that person's name, to email them directly as opposed to just email the financial aid email, because there's hundreds and hundreds of students emailing that email. So other questions are more academic. So at this point, I hope your schedules are set, you're good to go, you have your classes, you're kind of well into the first week of the semester. But this might be something that comes up for the spring when you're thinking about your spring courses, about who can help me change my schedule. Maybe you're having an issue with a professor in your courses. Who do you talk to? How do I get a tutor? So maybe you're in a class and already you're like, I know this is not the class for me. I'm going to have a lot of struggles, right? Like I'm going to need some help. And how can I find out about important dates? So those are some very common questions. And I'm going to talk about ways to help you answer those questions in a minute. And then finally, in between. So who do I go to for questions? A lot of the struggle from going, you were at your old institution, wherever that was, maybe you were local, maybe you were at Camden County, maybe you were at Rowan or Burlington County, or maybe you're all the way in Atlantic Cape, who knows? Like everyone comes from different spots, but you got used to the system there, right? So you knew who you had to talk to about something. You knew which office did what, but now you're in a whole new territory and you're trying to figure out what's now what, right? So like, who do I talk to about this? Who's going to be my resource? So we're going to provide you some resources about who to go to for what, to kind of help you as you kind of navigate this first semester and things that come up. Okay. So you'll see that there's a kind of a theme here, right? So questions and concerns are overlapping, and a lot of what it comes back to is who can help me. So that's the bottom line in all of this, right? So I have a question about this. Who's going to help me solve this, or who's going to help me address this? And that's kind of the whole purpose of this presentation today. We want to give you some information about who can help you when you are having specific concerns or issues or questions, or if you just need to talk to somebody. So as I mentioned, there's a big difference, right? So I know people have said to you, and I talked to a student the other day who was transferring in to the institution. She said, it's only been a few days, but I can tell there's such a big difference between the community college and here, like just how things are handled, right? And it doesn't even mean just being in a four-year institution. You're at Rutgers-Camden, and Rutgers-Camden itself is different in how it does things. So trying to figure out how this place works, and we're, even though we're a small campus, we may be a lot bigger than the community college you were at. So there's a lot of differences in how things are handled, what offices do what, and what is expected of you as a student. Other concerns that come up, of course, and this is probably not any different than when you're at the community college, but what if I don't do well in my classes? What if I'm struggling? What if I fail my midterm? What if I can't talk to my professor during office hours? Who's going to help me? The difference is now is that you may have had resources or people that helped you when you were at the community college, and now you're like, I have no idea who I'm going to talk to here. What makes it worse is that we're talking through a screen, right? So you're not able to just walk in and say, hey, you look like somebody who can help me. Can you help me? Now you have to do extra legwork. There's emailing, there's like really seeking people out to get that help. And that can be a big barrier, especially when you're short on time and you have other responsibilities in your life. So we're hoping that today this kind of helps you figure out who you can talk to or kind of cut down on some of those steps. And also we see this a lot with transfer students, particularly because you already have life experience, right? So some people were at community college for a couple of years, some took a little bit longer. I know in our program in EOF, we have a lot of students that are returning. So like they may have taken some time off after high school and now they're coming back to school. And so they're later in the game, right? They're in their 20s. They might have kids. They might have families of their own. And so we know that you're not just a student, right? You're a son, daughter, parent, brother, sister, caretaker, you have a job, you might employ other people. There's a lot of roles that you play, and being a student isn't the only one. So how do you juggle that? Who can help you kind of navigate those challenges that come up when you're also trying to balance everything else in your life? So again, all this comes down to is who can help me? Who's going to help me navigate this as I work through the next couple years that I'm here at Rutgers-Camden? So with all that said, right, I just said a lot very quickly. But the first thing that I would recommend is just to make a plan. So these are some quick tips. This is not by any means an exhaustive list, because honestly, everything is going to be it should be personal to you and your life. Everyone is different. So everybody works a little bit different. Everyone's schedule is a little bit different. But the first thing I would, and hopefully you have, because you're here, right? You got classes, you're in courses, connecting with an academic advisor. These are the people that certify your graduation. They make sure that you have taken all the right courses to finish your degree. So connecting with them as soon as possible to make sure you're on the right track is number one, right? That's going to be your number one resource in terms of making sure your courses are correct. Build relationships with your professors. I know it's only the first week and it's a little awkward through virtual, but one of the best pieces of advice I can give is to just send an email to your professor and say hello. Don't wait until you're struggling in the class. Professors, are open to building relationships with students, but often have told us that students only reach out to them when they need help. And so, say hello, especially if it's in your major. Like if you're in business or you're in marketing and you have like a professor you really like in your major, start making those connections, because they can be invaluable. They can help you find internships or jobs or connect you with other people that can build you great opportunities. As a person who's an administrator, and I know Ms. Waters can also speak to this, is we share resources with students we think of, right? So if we have students who, reach out to us and tell us, I really need an internship, or I really need like a volunteer opportunity, I need something, and something pops up, that person is going to be the person that pops into my head because they've reached out to me before. And so I highly recommend just trying to get into people's heads. Email them, say hi, that you're available, that you want to learn more about what they do, what their research is, and you'll be amazed about how many opportunities come your way when you just put yourselves on people's radar. The Career Center, I don't know how much you guys have seen from them yet, but they are doing a lot of things this semester. They are doing like virtual job fairs, internship fairs. They do resume review, cover letter review. They do dining etiquette things. They do everything. So they are like a one-stop resource for everything. And that's not just jobs. So people think career fair and they're like, oh, it has to be the careers. Like that's all I go there for. They do help with graduate school work. So if you're thinking about going to grad school, they talk about what are the steps you have to do with that. They help with, like I said, internships and experience. So it's everything kind of related to what are you going to do after college is over, right? So even though you might have just got here, it's something you should already be thinking about, because what you do now is going to really impact when you graduate. You don't want to be in your final semester here and be like, oh crap, I don't have any experience. Like, how am I going to get a job after this? How am I going to get into grad school? So they're also a great resource. And you can just start with, if you haven't touched your resume in a while, just having them take a look, and they can really help you with that process. We do have tutoring, even though we are online. We have a fully online tutoring system. I'm going to share the websites with you in a second where you can look to schedule. But there is tutoring in most of the main courses that we offer. So if you're thinking about your maths, your Englishes, your sciences, we also have a writing and design lab. So there's people that just help with writing. So there's a lot of academic support out there. And what I recommend is to don't wait until you need help. Again, people who are the most academically successful build help into their routine. They build, they get support just because they know it's going to help them be a better student. So if you know you're not a strong, math student, start building in those math tutoring sessions on a weekly basis. It's like a supplemental study session, instead of having to just do it all on your own. So I definitely recommend to start early. Tutoring in general gets very jam-packed. It's really hard to schedule with somebody around midterms time, because that's when everyone wants a tutor, right? Like everyone needs that help cramming for that midterm. So if you can get in there early, it's going to give you such a huge benefit. And I did just see in the chat that Vernon asked if I can share the tutoring schedule. I can share the link. I'm going to share the link with you guys in a second of where you can like access tutoring and sign up for tutoring. It varies. It's based on the tutor's availability. So there's not one set schedule, but I will definitely share that with you. And then just like I said, financial planning, one of the biggest things I think I could recommend is to just be aware of a couple of things. One is dates, right? So we were just talking before we started about that it's almost time to renew your FAFSA. So FAFSA renewal is on October 1st of every year. I recommend you do it in the first week of October, because it gives you, it's done, it's over with. You don't have to worry about remembering to do it. The earlier you do your FAFSA and submit it, the more chance you're going to get all the aid that you're eligible for. When you wait to do your FAFSA, so say if you submit it after the deadline, then you're not guaranteed to get certain loans or grants. So making sure you're aware of that. So put it in your phone, October 1st, that's when it opens up for the year. If you're receiving state aid, so like the tuition aid grant is a state grant, they have their own deadlines when you have to submit documents. So just making sure that you're aware of these things, that you're checking these things out, and keeping like maybe it in your calendar so you don't forget. And then just checking your financial aid portal, checking your email, because all of these things, somebody will reach out to you about these things. It's just kind of keeping on top of it. Because, you know, honestly, one of the biggest things that become an obstacle for people finishing their degree or moving forward is not having the money to pay for it, because college is expensive, and you do not want to lose out on your tuition. The other thing is too, as a transfer student, and I know Ms. Waters talks about this a lot, is that you carry your whatever financial aid you got at the community college here. So if you were at community college for 3 years and you use 3 years of aid, it doesn't start over just because you came to Rutgers-Camden. You carry those 3 years of aid with you. So there is an eligibility window. So typically it's six years of aid that you receive, up to 6 years of aid. And so just being mindful that, you know, you're not wasting your time, so to speak. So trying to keep on an academic plan, trying to keep moving forward so that you don't, you know, get to that final semester and you don't have any aid to pay for it. You don't want to get into that space. So making sure that's also a great resource for your financial aid counselor. So figuring out how much aid do I have left? How much time do I have? What do I have to do to make sure that I'm paid until I graduate and not have to worry about a gap semester? Because that does happen to a lot of students. So thinking about those things now will really help you in the last couple of years of your degree. So I'm just going to leave this on the screen. I'm not going to really like talk through any of these things because I kind of want to move on to hearing from some questions from you all. But these are some of the websites for some of the offices I just kind of went over, and a little bit of like what do they do, right? So you might have heard of some of these offices already, but you may not even know what their purpose is. So of course the financial aid office, that's the general financial aid email. And so you can start there. That's one way to start. If you are a current EOF student, you can feel free to email me or message us and ask who your specific financial aid counselor is. If you're, you may all have the same one because you're an EOF student, but if you're not an EOF student, you're also welcome to email me as well, and I can share that with you. Registrars for your courses and your transcripts. The Wellness Center is also very important. I do want to touch on that for a second. This is a very stressful time in many people's lives, right? So it's not just school. We're in a pandemic. All of our lives have been fundamentally changed, some more than others. And so they have a lot of great resources. As a Rutgers-Camden student, you have access to wellness services, and that's both like physical health, but also mental health. So they offer counseling to students, and even virtual, they're doing virtual counseling. They are seeing some students in their office a few days a week. So that is a really important resource. And they also have a food pantry. So if you have not heard about that before and you're having issues with food insecurity, or you just can't afford to have, no questions asked, honestly, about what you need it for, there's a food pantry available. It's open a few days a week. When you click on their website, it tells you what days of the week they're open and what days the food pantry is open. But it has all sorts of non-perishable food items, but also things like dairy, like cheeses, milk, and all of that kind of stuff. So that's open to all students as well. So that's a very great resource in case you are in need of food. Our office, so myself and Mrs. Waters are in the EOF office, and we're under the Division of Student Academic Success. And Ms. Waters just posted the link to tutoring, and that falls under our office as well. So there's tutoring, there's disability services. So if you've had accommodations at your previous institution and you need them here, you can request them for here through the Disability Services office. And there's also other great resources within our office. There's Institute for Leadership in Action, there's TRIO, which is a very similar program to ours. So we kind of have a lot of the academic support under our office. So if you visit that website, you'll see all the offices that are under there. And then lastly, campus involvement. So if you want to get involved on campus, if you are on the app or you've seen some advertisements, you'll see that we are very active this semester, even though we are virtual. So there are fraternities and sororities, there's academic organizations and honor societies, there's also just social organizations, things based on religion, ethnicity, all sorts of things that are out there. So I highly encourage you to think about some of this stuff, about maybe getting involved to help you kind of connect with other people on campus. Okay, so I'm going to stop. Well, I'm not going to stop sharing my screen because I want you guys to look at these questions. But Ms. Waters, do you think we should just do it in this room so we don't have as many people, since we don't have as many people?
I think that's a good idea. And since we have Samira as our previous transfer, she can certainly speak to the entire group in terms of her transfer experience, instead of just putting her in a room with just a few people. I think that's a good idea.
Okay, so that's going to be our next step. I know I just said, like, before we move on to that, I know I just said a lot. I know I moved that through very quickly. I just kind of gave you a crash course of Rutgers life in about 15 minutes, which is not really great, but it's just an overview. We're recording this presentation, so I can share it with any one of you if you need to review it again. I can also send the PowerPoint, and we're going to share our contact information at the end in case you do have follow-up questions about anything you saw. But yeah, so the next part we want to move into is to provide some space for to share your own experiences and hear from experiences. So do you want to introduce our transfer student, Ms. Waters?
Yes, absolutely. It is my pleasure to introduce one of my specific transfer students. Her name is Samira Bishop. She is due to graduate in May of 2021. Yay. And so she comes to us she's one of our off-campus students at Atlantic Cape, and has done extremely well with, just the EOF compliance and just doing, whatever I said, this is what you have to do. And she follows everything strategically. She will reach out when she needs help. And, it has, just like any transfer student coming from a community college, it was an adjustment for her as well. So Samira, I'm going to have you introduce yourself, your major and so forth. And then we'll get right into the 3 questions, which I did provide to you before, so that you can share your transfer experience. Okay?
All right, no problem.
There you go.
So, good morning, everyone. My name is Samira Bishop, and I am in my senior year of the social work program. Well, the bachelor's in social work is what I am pursuing currently. And as Ms. Waters said, I'm a transfer student from community college, and my transition was an overwhelming experience, because before I actually got the hang of everything, just the transition from community college to Rutgers was a big difference, like the course load and everything like that. But I was fortunate enough to ask questions, utilize the services, and one point I would like to say is to never feel like a question is dumb, or never feel like you're asking too many questions, because I asked all the questions. So that helped a tremendous amount. So should I go on to the questions?
Yep, go right ahead. They're right on the screen.
All right. Oh, duh, it's right here. Okay, so
Yep.
my transfer experience, which I just talked about, was it was better than I expected. I was scared. Like I said, it was all new to me, but to utilize your services, ask questions and all that, that would be very helpful for you guys. So the next question is, what was the greatest challenge you encountered and how did you work through it? So the most challenging issues that I had was learning to manage my time management, and learning to get organized was very, very challenging for me, because when I started at Rutgers, the course load is bigger, the classes are more challenging, and I had to figure out how to get it together, basically. So what I did was I asked like other students, what should I do? I asked like family members, what should I do? So what I felt to work for me was to get a daily planner. You might need more than one, but I have daily planners. And I also got a dry erase calendar and a bulletin board, so I don't forget like assignments. So I know that assignments are coming up, and it helped me so much, so much. Um, and the third question says, what advice could you give a new transfer student? So the advice that I would give new transfer students would be to utilize all the student services, as I had mentioned previously. The tutoring services, the wellness center, those are services that I utilize that I thought I wouldn't utilize in the beginning, but guess what? They helped a lot. They helped tremendously. And I would also recommend that to stay resilient. Stay resilient, stay hopeful, never give up. Things are going to get hard. Life happens. Believe me, life happened to me a lot while I was a student. But it's like life is going to happen whether you're a student or not. So you might as well keep the course and stick to it. And that's about it.
Thank you for
You're
sharing.
welcome.
I really, really appreciate you.
You're welcome.
And so, and you know, and just to piggyback on what Samira was saying, don't ever think that it's not a question you can ask, because if we don't know the answer, we'll find it. So the question you may direct it to us, but we're not the department who handles it, but we will get you to the people that you need to speak to help answer those questions. So no question is a dumb question. You know, we've had students come up with some things and they'll say, oh, I didn't know I could ask you. Absolutely, you never know what information we have. And, you know, and life happens. You know, Samira has had a very difficult last semester and summer, and she is still, you know, she's been being very resilient, and she's still, you know, moving forward because life does happen. This is a very unprecedented situation happening to all of us right now. You know, I have two kids in two separate rooms right now, so I can do this presentation because they're both in remote right now. I had one outside, he came in, outside didn't work for him. So we figure it out, you know, and some of you, a lot of our transfer students are parents. And so we have to figure it out, but you have to do what works for you. And you wanna make sure that you plan, because I always tell students, if you don't plan, you're gonna plan to fail. You have to have a plan, create a plan, and that plan can be tweaked. But what you're not going to be able to do is miss classes, miss assignments, be late with that, because, you know, professors aren't going to think about, oh, well, you have a family at home, your kids are remote, this is why you didn't do the assignment. No, they're not going to do that. So you want to make sure at an institution like Rutgers, that is, you know, a research institution, you know, very well known, professors expect with skills, they expect that you're coming, you know, with information. Transfer students all have already been to classes, have already done research papers, so they're just going to pick up where you left off and assume that you're not freshmen. And so that in itself puts high expectations on students. It can be overwhelming, but we do have services to help you navigate maybe test taking strategies, time management, study skills. We have all of those services available to you, again, actually through the Learning Center. And if you go on our website, you'll see the services as well, or just email us or Mrs. Ferguson. So now we wanna, Ms. Ferguson, do you wanna move forward with Q&A from the participants? You can take over.
Yeah, so I just put something in the chat, but you can also open it to everyone. You can just unmute yourself and ask a question, but you've been here a little bit. I mean, you've been a part of the Rutgers process probably for a few months now since you kind of got accepted, right? But now you've officially been in Rutgers for a week. So what questions do you all have? What concerns are coming up for you? Anything, as Ms. Samara said, nope, ask all the questions. Like, there are no dumb questions. So does anyone have any things that have come up for them that they want to know more about, or something I talked about in the presentation that you want to know more about? Don't be shy, anyone. There's no quiz.
I have a question.
Yes. Oh, sorry. You can go ahead.
It's okay. You can go ahead.
All right. I appreciate the sharing that has just taken place. I also was almost getting overwhelmed with schedules and work, family, and all that. But the fact that she shared on having several calendars to track your school dates, due dates, and all that. But then the question I have is, what would be your specific advice to me, knowing that I work, I have a family, and then I'm in this school. I have to make sure that all these things are performed better. I don't know. What would be your specific advice?
Amira, do you want to answer that, since
Okay.
that's a situation you're still in now?
Yes. So my specific advice to you would be, like, as you mentioned, to get the calendars and the planners, but what you have to do is designate certain time, like certain days or certain hours in the day consistently. So, like, for example, for me, I would do my work, like, I'm just giving you an example, like Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I will make sure I do work, like set blocks of hours to specifically get this work done. And then I also will set days where I have self-care and I plan to not do any work, or at least a day or two per week. But you have to stick to the plan in order to get it done if you can. Try to work around your work schedule. Try listen, basically it will be times where you might have to pull out a book and read, like, while you're waiting at an appointment. You gotta do things like that and become creative with completing these goals.
I appreciate that, because when we were not virtual, I took the train to work, and I would read on the train, or would try to do anything that I could while in those 20 minutes of time. And so I definitely echo that. Like, creativity is a part of it, but schedule is also a big part of it. You have to, part of this process, and it changes. So I think one of the things that people get stuck on is that what worked for me last year, blank, is not working for me now. It's going to change. Your life changes, right? And it changes even with your courses. Like, if you were like, oh, I could use flashcards for this class, but this class, flashcards doesn't work. That's common, right? It's going to change based on the content. It's going to be based on the professor. It's going to be based on your life. So kind of being open to flexibility, and knowing that each semester might change. But I absolutely agree with designating times and figuring out when that works for you, right? Like, everyone's schedule is different. So I know students who have to do all their work later at night. when their kids go to bed. Or they do it early in the morning before like people get up and start bothering them, like, or before they go to work. Like, and so it's really, or you're like, I'm not a morning person. I can't read or study in the morning, but I'm someone who can work late at night. Like, it's also just kind of factoring all those things in to make your own plan. So I absolutely agree with that.
Yeah, and I definitely would also suggest deciding how much you can handle. So maybe taking 12 credits a semester instead of 15, because 15 is too much. And you can't risk dropping classes or failing classes. And remember that as new transfers, your GPA does not transfer. So if you did really well in your previous institution, congratulations, that is great. Your GPA right now at Rutgers is 0 because you haven't created a GPA yet. So this first semester is very crucial as a transfer student because you got to try to hit close to that 4.0 as possible and then work from there. And usually with the research that we've done in EOF, transfer students have what's called a transfer shock, where, as Samira Bishop mentioned, that, when you get to this institution, you realize, oh my God, this is not like what I'm used to, and you have to adjust very quickly. But with that as well, you will also notice that the coursework itself is difficult. You go to class to learn, and then you leave class to do your work. So it's not like professor going to sit and say, okay, maybe a math class, they'll say, okay, let's try these problems and see how you do. But everything else, you're actually leaving the class to go do work, to go do papers, to go do homework, to go read an article. You're not doing it in the class. You just come into the class to get the information. So a lot of your learning is done outside the classroom. What does that look like for you, for a person who works and a person who has a family? I work, I have a family. Samira works, she has a family. Ms. Ferguson works, she's in grad school, so we have to figure out what that looks like for our families. So I've had to have conversations with my family, well, this time I'm doing this. This time, I cannot be disturbed. And so communicating that with your family so they understand to respect that space and that time for you, especially now that you're virtual and you may have to, like, as you can see, I'm in my dining room area. This is my section. So no one comes over here. No one touches anything over here. Every day I put it on my table and every day I put it back. And that's part of that self-care, because you do have to disengage during this time so that you can have a mental break. It can't be that you're doing schoolwork and work and family 24/7 without even exhaling. So you have to figure out, what does self-care look like for you? And, what does homework time look like for you? And what does work look like for you? And then family time, because your family does need you and want you around. You have to have that family time with them as well. So that would be my suggestion, because again, I'm going through the same thing.
Thank you.
Can I recommend one more thing? I'm sorry. So one more thing I would like to recommend out of it, I know everybody's a different type of learner, but one thing that I found out to work for me was audiobooks, because I spend a lot of time driving and I can listen to the audio book while I'm driving, and it helps a lot. So that's another tip.
Yep, that's good too. You have to find out what kind of learner you are. So yeah, that's good too.
I think there was another question. Was there another question?
Yeah, I had a question. It's about EOF. So like, if somebody's like an override for EOF, does it mean like, what does it mean? Like, would they get EOF or like not?
Yeah, so I think you're referencing, because I had emailed you the other day. So basically, it just means that I have to request from the state that you've received the grant. So you're still, like, we have different, it's hard to explain, but there's basically different like eligibility thresholds. So the state sets an eligibility threshold for all UF students, and then there's some wiggle room outside of that, where if a student is in that wiggle room, we can ask that the student be funded. And so it's just a matter of it getting approved. They're really, unless there's some other thing that I don't know about, usually the approval process goes fine, but I'll keep you updated on that. And then as soon as it's approved, and this is probably good information for everyone in here, since I think everyone in here is a potential EOF student. Once you're approved, then that we put the grant in HESA or New Jersey FAM, so you can see it. You'll be able to see your EOF grant. You see your tag grant in there. But because you're new students to the institution, you have to be approved by the state first before the financial aid can disperse the amount. So you might see it on your award letter, you might see an estimated amount, but it's not there yet. And that's because we have to go through like a processing system. So the state says, okay, these are the students you have to fund. They run it through their system, it's approved, and then financially we'll put it on your account. So that's why there's a little bit of a delay right now. Even if you completed all your documentation, you brought everything in, we have to wait for the state to approve. So that's why there's a little bit of a delay, but that should be, students should be receiving their grant by the end of this month as a new student. Did that help?
Yeah, it did. Thank you.
You're welcome. Other questions, concerns about anything that's come up that we haven't really covered today? Okay, well, I'm gonna, hold on one second, let me share. Okay. So you guys are all, I believe, EOF students, so you've seen probably these contact information before, but what I would recommend for you is ask all the questions. I really appreciate you saying that, Samira, because that is such a big part of this process, is being your own advocate through this process. This is your education, you're paying for it. At the end of the day, you're the one who's earning this degree, right? And so we're gonna support you in this process as best as we can. We can only support students when we know they need the support, right? So if you're an EOF, you're gonna receive a lot of emails from us. You're gonna receive a lot of stuff from your counselor. You're gonna, be invited to these workshops. But ultimately, at the end of the day, it's up to you to sign on to your computer, right? It's up to you to answer that email. We can't force you to do that, and it's a challenge. Normally we're in person, we might see you on campus, we might track you down and say, where have you been, come back in our office, but we can't do that now. So we have to heavily rely on your communication as well, and that's something we didn't really touch on, but I think is important, is communicate, ask questions. If something comes up in your life, because there is so many things going on, let your professor know, send them an email, send your EOF counselor an email, so that somebody knows, so that if other steps need to be taken, like if you need to, get out of a course, or you need an excuse of absence or something, that we have the information available to vouch for you. So I mean, communication is going to be so important during these times that we're virtual. Asking other questions, don't ever be afraid to put yourself out there. We work for you, essentially, right? Your tuition is what's like driving this institution. This program, EOF, exists as a way to support you, to support students. And so we want to know how to best support you. And the only way we know is if you let us know. And utilizing your resources. Like I said, I recorded this so we can share the recording. On the Canvas page that you all are a part of for the transfer students, I'll share some of these resources as well. But I also recommend highly utilizing your EOF counselor. And so asking them questions. If you're like, I can't figure out what's happening in this class, I need support, they'll help you figure out how to schedule tutoring. So there's going to be someone there to support you. So just reaching out and ask, and we'll help you get to where you need to go. Anything else, Mrs. Waters, that I'm missing?
No, I just want to just reiterate what you mentioned earlier in terms of transfer students having a good understanding of the financial aid process. Because yes, there's always that misconception that when you get to the new institution, you get new funding and so forth. And transfer students don't realize that their financial aid continues. So, and you have to have an idea of, and you can find that on NJFAMS, how long you've had TAG or how long you've had EOF, and it helps you. And if you don't, definitely your EOF counselor can help you find that information. The financial aid office can help you find that information so that you have a plan. So, and that's usually why transfer students, when they get to the new institution, they got maybe 2, maybe 3 years left. to finish their degrees before they max out of their financial aid. So having that conversation with your financial aid advisor, or going into NJ FAMS, and Ms. Ferguson just put the website on the chat to find out exactly how much aid you have. So now you can plan. So if you only have 2 years left, well, you have to be done in 2 years. If you have 3 years, then you have 3 years to finish. So that way you don't run and then have to think of maybe out-of-pocket cost or something like that. You don't want surprises later. And then your loans, when you get to a 4-year institution, your loans are different as well. I'm sorry, your loans are not different. You get a maximum of $30,000 as undergrad student, which also includes community college. So as you're borrowing, it's adding up, and then at some point you're done with undergrad loans. So again, a conversation you may want to have with your financial aid advisor, so that you have a full plan of how much aid and loan money you have left, so that you can finish your degree at Rutgers, which then will let you know how much time you need to finish. Like, I have 2 years, I have 3 years, and I'm good. So there you go. Thank you, Ms. Ferguson.
No problem. And also, since you're all potential EOF students, your financial aid counselor is Ms. Lakeisha Villan Cortez. So I'm putting her name in the chat right now and her email. And some of you may have already talked to her because she's been the one doing the processing of all the documents. But just in case, she would be the one you would reach out to if you have any questions. She's very, very helpful, and she can help you with any questions you may have specifically about your financial aid. But if there's no other questions, we really appreciate you guys joining us today. We hope you have a great, rest of your week, but please reach out to us. Every week changes, every day changes with, the semester, the things that come, and there's going to be ups and downs, and that's absolutely okay. We're here to support you through that process. That's all I have.
That's it. Samira, any last words?
Good luck, everyone. You'll do fine.
Best wishes to you all. Well, I'm sure we'll talk to each other again. Have an amazing week.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Thank you.